Welcome to The Explainer. So, 1947. India gets its independence. But what kind of economy did it actually inherit? Today, we're going to peel back the layers of history and really get into the nitty-gritty of what India was facing at that exact moment.
Before the British came along, India wasn't just another country, it was a global economic powerhouse. Its agriculture was booming, and its handicrafts, we're talking these gorgeous silks and incredible metalwork, they were famous all over the world. But then, you fast forward to 1947, and wow, the picture could not be more different. The economy had basically ground to a halt, just stuck in this loop of agricultural poverty.
So, this huge shift, right, from a thriving, successful economy to one that's, well, on its knees, it brings up the one big question we're going to tackle in this explainer. How on earth did this happen?
To get to the bottom of that, you've really got to understand the blueprint, the whole game plan behind the economic policies of that era. See, their goal was never, ever about developing India. It was all about serving a completely different master. And look, this isn't just us looking back with 2020 hindsight. Just listen to this quote from the Viceroy of India himself, way back in 1894. He said, "If we lose India, the sun of our empire will have set." That tells you everything, doesn't it? India wasn't just some colony. It was the absolute economic engine of the British Empire. The key thing to get here is that none of this was an accident. Not at all. It was a very deliberate, very focused strategy, and it had one single purpose: to completely re-engineer India's economy to fuel Britain's own industrial revolution. And the plan itself? It was actually brilliantly simple, with two main parts. Part one, turn India into this massive pipeline of cheap raw materials, things like cotton just flowing straight to British factories. And part two, transform India's huge population into a captive market, basically forcing them to buy back the finished goods that were made in those exact same factories. Okay, so that was the blueprint, but how did they actually put it into action? Let's break it down and see how each major part of the Indian economy was fundamentally changed. And we'll start with the biggest one by far, agriculture. So, the economy was just overwhelmingly agricultural. We're talking almost 3/4 of the entire population depending on farming just to get by. But here's the thing, that huge number wasn't a sign of strength. Nope. It was actually a symptom of a sector that was in deep, deep trouble. And despite being the very backbone of the economy, Indian agriculture was just stuck. It was a world of old-school technology, almost zero investment, and because of that, chronically low productivity. It just wasn't producing enough. So why was it so stagnant? Well, the reasons were baked into the system. You had things like the zamindari system, where landlords collected all the rent but had zero incentive to actually invest in making the land better. You combine that with almost no money going into modern tech or irrigation, or even basic stuff like flood control, and what you get is a recipe for disaster. It left farmers in this constant state of hardship. Now, while agriculture was just left to languish, India's other great economic pillar, its world-famous handicraft industry, was being actively torn down. This wasn't just a natural decline, it was a deliberate process that we now call deindustrialization. The reversal here is just staggering. India, a place once celebrated for exporting legendary textiles like Digai muslin, was now being forced to import cheap machine-made stuff from Britain. This didn't just flood the market and put countless skilled artisans out of a job, it systematically erased a centuries-old cornerstone of the Indian economy. Okay, so some modern industries did start to pop up, but the progress was painfully slow. And more importantly, there was a huge piece of the puzzle missing, what we call capital goods industries. These are the industries that make the machines and the tools that a country needs to industrialize on its own. Without them, India was always going to be dependent. So how did they hold this whole system together? Well, foreign trade. The rules around trade were specifically designed to lock in this new economic relationship and make absolutely sure that all the benefits flowed in only one direction, straight back to Britain. A real game changer here was the opening of the Suez Canal back in 1869. This incredible piece of engineering created a direct sea route to India. It slashed transport time and costs, and it just made it that much easier for Britain to completely dominate India's foreign trade. And the result of all these policies? A near total monopoly. You're looking at more than half of India's entire foreign trade being with Britain and Britain alone. Sure, there was some trade with other countries, but the main economic pipeline was locked in, and it pointed directly to the UK. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. It's kind of a paradox, actually. See, during this time, India was consistently exporting way more than it was importing. It was generating this huge export surplus. Now, normally, that should mean a massive flood of wealth coming into the country. But that wealth, it never actually arrived in the Indian economy. So, where did all that money go? Well, that surplus was used to pay for the British colonial administration running India, to fund wars the British Empire was fighting, and to cover all sorts of other British expenses. This constant, one-way siphon of money became famously known as the drain of wealth. You know, these economic policies, they weren't just numbers on a balance sheet. They had a devastating, real-world human cost. And when you look at the demographic data from that time, it paints a really grim picture of what life was actually like for the average person.
Get this, life expectancy was just 32 years. 32! Just let that sink in for a minute. You had rampant poverty combined with a near total lack of public health facilities, and it meant that for millions of people, life was tragically short and unbelievably precarious.
And what about education? It was almost non-existent for most people. The overall literacy rate was less than 16%. And for women, the number was even more shocking, around 7%. This wasn't just neglect, it was a massive barrier to any kind of social or economic progress. And maybe the most heartbreaking statistic of all was the infant mortality rate. An absolutely astounding 218 out of every 1,000 babies born did not survive. That's a number that speaks volumes. It tells you everything you need to know about the reality of widespread poverty and the complete absence of even the most basic health care.
So this was it. This was the economic inheritance of an independent India in 1947, a farming sector that was completely stagnant, an industrial base that had been crippled, and a population facing just immense social and economic challenges.
And this inheritance left India's new leaders with a challenge that's almost impossible to imagine. It left them with a single, profound question that would define the nation's entire future. When you're standing on the ruins of an economy like this, where on earth do you even begin to build?
Like, share, subscribe for more videos.